Hello again and welcome back to NFL TV. It's week 3 of the finals now and Cooney, we were out at Preston for 2 days over the weekend and we saw some really good action in Division 1. Of course on the Saturday we saw Greensborough take on Heidelberg. It was a pretty feisty game and one that had plenty of feeling as you come to expect with finals football. And then on Sunday I guess a bit of a surprise with the ease in which West Preston knocked over Monty, a side who was in some red hot form. You expect coming up on this weekend we might see a few more boilovers on the weekend.
Yeah, we saw a couple of great games in Heidelberg and especially West Preston, just very impressive. Especially as going into the game, I think we went either way on the tips, but we both said about a goal or two either way. If West Preston just come out and dominate the way they did was fantastic performance by the Roosters.
What we saw, I think, on the weekend is experienced sides just coming to the fore come finals time. Of course, Heidelberg, we all know what they've done in the past in finals football, and West Preston last year just showing how much they love that Preston City Oval, some wide spaces. They had a lot of young kids on the weekend, 3 players from the under-17s, and they weren't overawed by the experience, but with the help of players like Jake Williams, who I felt played a blinder, of course, big Anthony Rocker up forward, who was at his dangerous best, kicked 4 goals 5 in fact, and could have had a few more, missed a few of those shots from 30 metres, which I guess we've come to expect over his career, but he was very good despite being on the card for 15 minutes, so he had a good game. But this weekend you expect the action to be just as good, and of course in Division 4 we also have our first grand final of the year when South Moraine takes on Parkside, which we'll get to later in the program. But first off, we've got Heidelberg versus Bundoora. It's the second semi-final. The winner progresses straight through to the grand final. I think for most fans of the NFL, it's probably the game they expected to see in this week of the finals, and probably one we've all been looking forward to for some time. It's the new minor premier up against the might of Heidelberg, and in the end only 1.37% of the percentage separated the two sides on the ladder, so not much in it. Of course, both finished the season on the same wins with 13 wins, and Heidelberg last weekend, a few of the older stars winding back the clock, and Mark Favre up forward kicked 6 and just seemed to be able to get a goal when his other teammates couldn't. He had 6 of their first 8, and at 3/4 time they led by just 7 points. Favre came out, kicked the first within about 20 seconds of the fourth quarter, and just set the tone for that last quarter. They did go on to kick 7 goals to 2 and split open the game. Bundoora would have enjoyed that week off. It was a very bruising game, the Heidelberg Greensborough, and I'm sure Bundoora would have been happy to see that. Greensborough giving quite a good run for 3/4 before running out of legs. Bundoora, I guess, fancy by that, but Heidelberg in the final, you never write them off, and you wouldn't expect more than perhaps 6 or 7 points in this one. I'm leaning towards Bundoora, given that I had that week off, but it's so hard to tip against Heidelberg in the finals.
Yeah, they were fantastic against Greensborough. They threw everything at them, especially in that first half. It was pretty much nip and tuck the whole way. But I think in the third quarter, so Faber actually kicked all 4 goals of Heidelberg in that third quarter. Just going off memory, he was fantastic and really sort of stood up when the game was said he won. So great effort by him. But yeah, on form, it's sort of hard to tip against either side. They've been fantastic all year, but Bundoora having that extra week off, and obviously we saw a few of the players out on the weekend doing a little bit of scouting, and just think they might be a little bit fresher than Heidelberg and could. We saw both games really sort of ran out in the last quarter on the weekend. I think with that extra break, Bundoora might be a little bit fresher and just have that extra edge in the last 10-15 minutes or so.
Well, we saw the versatility of Dale Nolan on the weekend. Of course, when we watched the NFL match of the day, going back to round 15, he played at full forward and was, I guess, the major presence up forward for Heidelberg. On the weekend, goes down back and just marshals the troops in the defence. He was fantastic, cut off many a 4-8 forward for Greensborough, and also saw Blue Harvey and Michael Finn just work fantastically together in the middle of the ground. You chuck Danny Nolan into the mix. It's an experienced midfield. Finn just has the ability to get first hands on the footy every time in the ruck contest. We know Bundoora's got some pretty good ruck stocks as well, and they're going to have to be at their absolute best this weekend because, as we saw from the weekend, I think Heidelberg won that midfield battle, which enabled them in that last quarter to run all over the top. Also, Luke Stanton was magnificent up forward, played almost a nullifying role, but was able to push on and get some dangerous positions himself as well. He's very good, and Bundoora will be under no illusions. They know they have to be at their absolute peak on Saturday to win that game of football.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we can't really say enough about Finn's performance on the weekend. We've only seen Heidelberg a couple of times this year, so we sort of haven't really known about. Obviously, you know about how well they're playing, but don't see them as much. So don't have that first-hand experience. But we've seen them about 3 times in the last 5 or 6 weeks now, and I think Saturday from Finn was one of the best performances we've seen from a player all year. He was just dominant in the ruck all day, and just just gave Heidelberg first use on pretty much every occasion.
Well, of course, it's a massive game. That one is at Preston City Oval on Saturday, so make sure you do check it out. We've also got we're back at Preston on Sunday. It'll be, again, the NFL match of the day on Sunday. We'll be calling from 2 p.m, and it's West Preston up against Greensborough. It's a really interesting affair because we see so often when you get to these games, you see the first semi-final and you see a side knocked over in the first week, you watch the other who gets a win, and in West Preston's case, you always fancy them a little because you saw them get a win on the weekend. It's just probably that most recent memory of the two sides, and you tend to lean that way. But as we saw throughout the whole home and away year, Greensborough just wins those games, and you might think they might slip up and might be a bit of an underdog. They seem to be able to get up, and they did knock over West Preston during the year when it broke that run of seven straight wins. First time around it was West Preston by 10 points. It was a very close game again where Greensborough did lead in the last quarter, but the Borough, despite going down by 39 points, I don't think that final margin did them any justice. For 3 quarters, it was never really more than 2 goals in the game, and they were very good. They tried to be extremely physical against Heidelberg. It backfired a little. They probably went over the top at some certain points in the third quarter as well. I think Heidelberg really got going after half time after a bit of a fracas, but you have to be, if you're Jack Hyde, be pleased with the way the endeavour the young boys showed. Of course, Nick Riddle just put in another fantastic performance at centre half back, kicked the goal of the day without doubt, probably the goal of the weekend, where he smothered that ball on the wing and just picked it up, took a couple of bounces, broke some tackles and kicked one from 55. And along with Ricky Mullins, they had a lot of young kids in the side. I think there was 5 players who were eligible for under 19s rather, and you add Riddle to that, who is only 19 years old. It's a very young side, a lot to work with. But West Preston just showed how good and how damaging they can be on that wide ground. They spread so well, and Sean Gannon was fantastic, as was a couple of players coming out from half back as well. They were very strong, and of course a big rocker up forward. Presti doing the job on limb back for 3 quarters on the weekend, and as we said, that midfield with the Macheski boys and Jakey Williams in there, a very hard midfield to crack. Add Billy Morrison and the versatility that he brings, and they are a very hard side to line up against. But Greensborough, I think, for 3 quarters showed that they could match it with the best, and they were very close to Heidelberg. You probably always felt the last quarter Heidelberg would get them, but I reckon Greensborough has what it takes to bounce back this week, despite how good West Preston was on the weekend.
Yeah, I think what will hinge for Greensborough if Plummer can come back, who was obviously missed last week, and you'd think that he'd probably be the best suited to get the job on Rocker, because he was, for West Preston last week, but just his dominance was fantastic from the start. I think he took a first contested marking game, it was a few minutes in, it was just sort of really set the tone for the day. And as good as Nick Riddle's been on, you purely just think, the fact that he's 19 going up against Anthony Rocker, who's probably all about 120, 130 kilos, and 6'4" in the old scale, would just be too strong for him in a one-on-one sort of situation, and could maybe nullify Riddle's effectiveness off the half back line. So might have been a tough day there. If Plummer can come back, and obviously he can do a bit of the load with that, but just looking at it again, a sort of situation similar to maybe with Monty, that they get used to playing that small ground like Greensborough have down at War Memorial Park, and then stretching out onto the big, the massive ground at Preston City Oval. West Preston did really well against on the weekend. Obviously did the same last year. So if Greensborough can adapt to that, they'll be a pretty good shot. But you think that, again, just the experience might give West Preston the edge, but it'll be a very, very close game, you think, much closer than we saw last weekend.
Well, there's a few interesting points there, because obviously they do play on the smaller ground, but you would fancy that Greensborough, given the big ground and the young legs, you would have felt that they probably could run over Heidelberg. In the end, it was a very bruising game, a very taxing, warm conditions that probably played some part in the final result, but a big game for a couple of guys for Greensborough, in particular Aaron Burns and Josh Riddle, who had their colours lowered at the end of the day. They only combined for 1 goal on the weekend and didn't get too much off it. Of the ball. Burns did look live in the first quarter, but that was about it for him. So 2 dangerous forwards there who can kick a bag each, and they'll have to lift if Greensborough wins on the weekend. And onto the Riddle versus Rocker matchup, if it does happen. I guess Greensborough would argue that if they did use him, he's not going to have the body size, but if he can run off Rocker, he can be such a damaging weapon. And we know that Big Pebbles, if he does locate in the goal, he's not going to run out too hard and stretch himself as much. So it is, I guess, in one perspective, a win there for Greensborough, but as you did mention, he probably doesn't have the body size for him, and he might actually have to nullify his run a little if he's on a player as dangerous as Rocker. So it's a very interesting matchup, and I think if Plummer's available, he's probably the first one to have first crack at Anthony Rocker. But overall for West Preston, a great win on the weekend. 62 points against the side who'd won 10 of their past 11, and was somewhat of a smoky going in. We had the poll on the website last week about who the fans felt would win the premiership, and Montmorency was third favourite, and it's all over in a week for them. And probably in the end, just that hard run getting in, having to win so many games in the home stretch of the year, probably got them eventually just run out of the league. I think they were very flat from the get-go and never really got going. In Division 2, we have our preliminary finalists, Epping up against Diamond Creek, and Epping very nearly causing a bit of a boilover last weekend against Lowell Plenty. Let it quarter time, kicked inaccurately though, 3 goals, 7-4 straight. It's only led by the 1 point there. Opened it up to, I think it was 9 points at half time, and in the end it was Lowell Plenty just too strong. It was as close though as 2 points again in that last quarter before Lowell Plenty kicked 4 of the last 5 goals to run out by 25 points, with Epping showing they can match it with the Bears. Diamond Creek hasn't been able to do that so far this year, hasn't really got close to Lowell Plenty. Did put in their best performance of the year a fortnight ago in the first semi against Ladle, so they'll be buoyed by that. But you just think that all year Epping's been probably the one side that's been able to match it with Lower, and it's probably been, I guess, with Ladle that playing second fiddle to Lowell Plenty. With Ladle out of the race, you would really expect that it would now become a Lowell Plenty versus Epping game. Brent Gunnison, though, is in good form up forward, kicked another 8 goals. He's in fantastic form. I think he averages 7 goals in his past 7 appearances, so he's probably the player that Mario Bandera will put the most work into. But you'd think on form that Epping's shown for a longer period of time that they are probably the superior team over Diamond Creek.
Yeah, it probably would be the most sort of fitting matchup to have in the final. They've been, after obviously they had a really good start and then slipped up and fell away. Epping and Lowell Plenty has been fantastic throughout the season, but as you see plenty of times in footy, just because you might think you deserve it, it doesn't always happen. So Epping will definitely have a good battle on their hands against Diamond Creek, who, in the last, we said for a long time they didn't beat in top 4 sides, and they knocked off, pretty sure it was late in the season, and then they knocked them off in the finals. So in the last month they've done it twice.
They've also got Epping as well, which they won by 2 goals. Epping was a pretty undermanned side that day, but I guess they'll still take a lot of confidence out of the Creekers that they can beat Epping. It's really interesting. Epping's won 14 of the past 17, but as you said, that doesn't guarantee you a final spot. When the first ball is bounced, it's still 0-0. Should Epping get through this one, it'll be their first grand final since 1990. So plenty at stake. Of course, Diamond Creek has had some premiership success in the past decade. Went up to Division 1, has fallen back, but they know what it's about as a club. But a very exciting day for both the two sides.
Yeah, and either way, you'd think Lowell Plenty would just have a nice sort of week off, rest up and recover a little bit, because they've been fantastic, and they haven't really took the foot off the pedal or anything at all this year. They've just been sort of full sink ahead, pretty much because they've been chased by Epping and Ladle all the way to the line. But having that week off, you think whoever gets through will probably go in underdogs the week after the grand final. But we've seen that we haven't seen it as much from Diamond Creek, but we've seen that Epping can really mix it with Lowell Plenty. So we should have this time next week, obviously, know who we're going to see in a pretty enthralling grand final in Division 2.
Well, this game here, the prelim final, will be at Eltham Central Park. That's on Saturday as well. And I guess you do see a few ballovers in the finals, and we saw that with the Lowell Plenty reserves as well. Hadn't lost a quarter all season long, and unfortunately in the first final, losing their first game of the year by 4 points to Diamond Creek. So they're backing up again this weekend against the Fitzroy Stars. So if anything, that just shows that anything can happen in the final. I think they rolled 4 goals to 0 in the first quarter and never able to get back from there. So I guess that's just something that you come to expect in the final, that you just never know what's going to happen when that first ball is bounced. And finally to Division 3, where it's the first of our grand finals in the NFL for the year, or first of our senior grand finals at least, and it's at Epping Recreation Reserve on Saturday afternoon. It's the NFL match of the day, so make sure you listen in from 1 p.m. for the preview show, and then of course from 2 o'clock when we call all the action from South Morang up against Parkside. It's a massive day for both clubs. South Morang, it's been more than half a century since they've actually featured in a senior grand final, and for Parkside, the third grand final in a row, of course, in 2009, won the premiership. Didn't earn elevation that year. That was the year where, of course, the second division was split open, but last year went down to Hurstbridge. There again today, fantastic effort, or this weekend rather, and it's a fantastic effort to have made 3 grand finals in a row just in itself. Surely though, they go in as massive underdog against the South Morang outfit, which really gave them a touch-up 2 weeks ago in the second semi-final.
Yeah, going on that semi a fortnight ago, Parkside will need to find next year a fair bit in the last fortnight to match it with South Morang. They were far too good, and I think they got out to about 11 goals in that fourth quarter, and then Parkside kicked the last 2 or 3, I think, to be just, I just can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but so yeah, South Morang looked far too good, and it's a great story for Parkside, obviously having made the 3 grand finals in a row, but for South Morang to come from the bottom 2 like they were last year, to be on the verge of a premiership this year, is a fantastic effort. So it'd be a great game either way. Obviously both sides have pretty much everything to play for this time of year, but similar to the way we were talking about Rocker a few minutes ago, West Preston, I think we saw how good Whitnall was, especially against Parkside a fortnight ago. They just had no answer from up forward. He kicked 9 goals straight, and I think he got 7 contested marks and 7 goals inside the forward 50. So he was just far too big. So if they can't slow down him in that forward line, when you've got the carrying run that they do have through the midfield and off that half back line for South Morang, he's just the perfect man to get the ball to the end and kick goals. If they can't stop him, then it will be a pretty tough day, you think, for Parkside.
Well, we saw it last time around, and Parkside had the positive of kicking the first goal of every quarter, and they did start each quarter quite well, but we saw when South Morang really got going in that second term, kicked 7 goals in about 10 minutes, and just showed probably there's a bit of a gulf between those two sides. But on grand final day, I guess they're going to have to be at their absolute best again. They can't rest on their laurels, given the fact they have actually beaten Parkside in all 3 outings this year. I think going back into the first outing was 21 points, then it was 45, and then 52 fortnight ago. So they've been able to get a bigger margin each time they've played. Positively for Parkside, though, Andy Bennett came in on the weekend and proved the difference probably in the end against Panton Hill. They got up by 2 points, and for a guy who hasn't played football for, I think it's 2 months now, he of course, a McLeod Division 1 player last year, came down to Parkside this year, made a huge difference in the first half of the year. They've really missed his presence in the last probably 2 months of the season. He comes back in, kicks 5 goals, a magnificent effort. They really got the jump on Panton Hill, out by 7 goals at half time, 6 at 3/4 time, and then the Redbacks really made a charge late, very nearly pinched it. I think it was 7 goals in the last quarter, Parkside managing just 1 or 2, so a very near miss there for Panton Hill, but Parkside that start really was what it took to get them into the grand final. They go in without any pressure on their shoulder. I think everyone expects South Morang to get a win and probably win by about 5 or 6 goals and win comfortably, but Parkside will have hoped that South Morang put in their grand final effort 2 weeks ago when they really did touch them up. They're gonna have to be their absolute best. They're quite aware of that, but upsets do happen in grand finals. But if both sides play at their peak, and South Morang just looks to be in really good form, their last month going into this game, you look at some of the results after having a loss and then a bye. I think the closest anyone's got to them is about 50 points, and they've scored on average, I think it's about 125 points. So they really are scoring quite well. All year they've been the hardest team to score against, only conceding I think less than 70 points a year. I think it's 69 per game. So the defence is quite good, or more than quite good, very strong, and the attack is just as good at the moment. You really fancy them, and I think they'll win this one by about 5 or 6 goals.
Yeah, and I think for Parkside it will be a really big test. One of the key players down to McKinley in the ruck. When we saw them a fortnight ago, Matt Manning was fantastic. Again, he was just really good in the ruck. We haven't seen them all year, but he didn't start in the ruck. They sort of put him in there sort of late in the first quarter, and then he pretty much didn't move out of the ruck the rest of the game. He was very good. Just his leap was something we really sort of took a bit of notice of when we were doing the commentary. He just got up that little bit higher at McKinley all the time. But yeah, on the form, it just as the last month or so, pretty much the form of the whole season, they've been the strongest side almost without doubt all year. So yeah, it's tough to go against them. I think they should probably be about 5-6 goals to a better side. But as we've said a few times already on this program, anything can happen in finals. So we'll have to wait and see.
Of course, and make sure you get out to Epping Recreation Reserve. If you can't make it, do listen in on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM as myself, Cooney and Seats in, and perhaps even Sam Pat will be out there to call the games. We'll see how he's travelling, but it's going to be a massive game. It's of course a big day for both clubs. Parkside in their 3rd grand final, which is in a row, which is a great feat in itself. And the South Morang looking to break that long premiership drought. And they've been the best side all year, but they'll have to be just the best side in that one day to ensure they win the premiership and earn promotion into Division 2 next year. Make sure you get down there or listen in, and it's going to be a massive day. So come here again next week, and we'll wrap up the game as I'll give you a bit of a review of the game and of course preview the Week 4 action, the finals footy. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again next weekend.